Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome. You are tuned into Mic Drop. I'm your humble host, Big Mike, coming to you from my home. Welcome. Hope everyone's doing fantastic out there. I am doing lovely. So, this vlog is going to be a little bit different than most of the vlogs, that I tend to do. Usually, most of my vlogs tend to be of relationships and dating and all that jazz. This one is going to be a little bit different. One of the things that I enjoy is sports. I'm a sports guy, love my sports. As you can see, I am wearing a lovely jersey. This is my birthday gift I gave to myself because my birthday was on Saturday, so I decided to order myself a Randall Cunningham throwback jersey, Philadelphia Eagles, 1990 edition. And by the way, he won the MVP that year, so I figured I would buy it because I am the MVP of YouTube vlogs. So I figured, why the hell not watching this? Also, he's a black quarterback, so why the hell not? But I want to also segue in, and this kind of ties into my topic because it's something that's been talked about a lot amongst different sports channels, different vloggers have talked about this on YouTube, and I've kind of discussed this in passing, and I felt, you know what? I think it's time that I kind of venture into this topic and I want to kind of bring it up. So I decided I'm going to talk about this. So I'm going to talk about is there an issue with black coaches being hired in the NFL? Now, I know this is not a topic that most are versed to that watch my channel, so I'll apologize. But I will try, if you do stick around and do decide to watch this, I will do my very best to explain this in terms that you can kind of get. And there's some social undertones to it as well. So, what sparked me to do this vlog? Well, so far, as you know, the NFL season's ended. We're in the playoffs right now. And usually during this time is when a lot of coaches are either being fired or hired. And this is usually the hiring season for a lot of the head coaches. Now, so far, there was about, I believe, 8 coaches that were fired during this season. They've hired about 7 new head coaches. Some good, some people are fans of the hire, some aren't. Actually, as a matter of fact, the Philadelphia Eagles, they hired their new head coach. Oddly enough, I didn't realize that until today. So the new head coaches, I'll give you their names, are Brandon Staley. He's the new coach of the the Los Angeles Chargers. Arthur Smith, head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Urban Meyer, the new head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Robert Saleh is the new head coach of the New York Jets. Dan Campbell is the new head coach of the Detroit Lions. And lastly, the Philadelphia Eagles hired Nick Sirianni as their head coach. Now, the one glaring thing about these hires is that all but one of them is white. Now, the NFL, many years ago, had instituted what they called was the Rooney Rule. So the Rooney Rule was basically a rule that the NFL instituted, which basically meant that NFL owners were required, as part of the CBA, to interview minority candidates for head coaching jobs. And this was in turn because at that time there was very little to no minority head coaches in the NFL. So this was the way to kind of keep, to make sure that minority coaches were getting their foot in the door. Now, the problem with this rule was that essentially these black coaches were just were going on the interviews. They were getting interviewed. But what was happening was the owners already had their guy in mind. So they were basically doing the interview with these coaches just so they had to do, because it was a violation of the CBA. So they were just doing the interview just to do the interview. It's like basically interviewing someone for a job externally when in reality, internally, you guys know who the fuck you're going to hire. That's basically what they were doing. So recently, they made, finally after how many years of the Rooney Rule, and the NFL realizing that it's been a complete dumpster fire, and given all the racial and social tensions, the NFL, whether you think they were being legit or sincere about it or not, is really trying to steer into social justice and social awareness and making that their forefront of their focus now, even though we all know that that's not really been their focus for a few years, but that's another vlog. Basically, they made a change to the Rooney Rule, whereas that they were going to incentivize teams that actually hired black head coaches or minority coaches by offering them extra NFL draft picks. So if a team did hire a minority coach, like for example the New York Jets hired Robert Saleh, who is of Lebanese descent and is a great coach, the San Francisco 49ers, which was the team he was the defensive coordinator, which is the defensive coordinator is the guy that calls the plays, and then he got promoted to the head coach of the New York Jets. Now, by the New York Jets hiring him, San Francisco now will automatically get 2 extra third-round picks on top of their draft. So that incentivizes them for doing it. So from that perspective, in theory, sounds good. Now, a lot of people had negative. They didn't like that idea because it's basically begging for an opportunity for something that we already earned. That, you shouldn't have to re-incentivize people or incentivize these owners for hiring a black head coach because we put in the work, we've earned it. And ultimately it boils down to the owners making that decision to hire a black head coach. Now, one head coach who's still has not been hired, he's interviewed for 6 coaches so far. He goes by the name of Eric Bieniemy. He's the offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs. And I guess they won the Super Bowl last year. He has basically been an offensive coordinator for the past 2 years under Andy Reid, who's the head coach, who's a white guy. And the past 2 years, 3 years, they've had the number 1 offense in the NFL that he's coordinated. Every coach, players, most NFL insiders rave about Eric Bieniemy and are shocked that he has not gotten hired for a job yet. He might get hired for the Houston Texans job, so that might be a possibility because of all the groundswell, possibly. Now all of a sudden they're starting to move the goalposts now by saying that, Eric Bieniemy, he's a good coach, but he never called plays. He's not, even though he's an offensive coordinator, he's never had to call plays and all that. But that's fair. That is absolutely fair. But you know what's a funny thing, too? The new head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, Nick Sirianni, oddly enough, he never called plays last year for the Indianapolis Colts. Somehow he got a head coaching job. Dan Campbell, who I saw, he used to be a former player. He was an interim coach for the Miami Dolphins. He was a special teams coach for the Saints. What would you know? Never called NFL plays. Frank Wright, the head coach for the Indianapolis Colts, when they went to the Super Bowl, when he was the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. You know what the funniest thing is? He never called plays. Who the fuck knew? Now, here's the thing. I am not saying by any stretch that Nick Sirianni, Dan Campbell cannot be head coaches. Dan Campbell seems like a very strong personality. Seems like a guy who can motivate the team, the Detroit Lions, who needs a new head coach, who needs that. And I don't know Nick Sirianni from can of paint, but we'll see how well he's able to manage men. Because ultimately, with a head coach, it's not just about calling plays. It's about being a leader of men. Now, if you're able to call plays and install a game plan, that's different. Now, Brandon Staley, he was the defensive coordinator of the Rams, number 1 defense in the NFL. Their defense is legit. I watched them play against Seattle a few weeks ago. Their defense is lights out. Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator of my Tennessee Titans. Great offense. So him getting that coaching job at Atlanta, totally fine with it. Urban Meyer, one of the best college coaches of all time, decides to go to the NFL. Have no doubt about him either, and Robert Saleh. So I'm not saying that these guys, these coaches that the owners hired are bad hires. And ultimately, the owners can decide who the hell they want to hire. But I just find it weird that people now want to say that, Eric Bieniemy isn't getting hired because he didn't call plays. Well then, or now I'm hearing, and I just watched a video by Cole Adams, and shout out to Cole Adams. If you're a football guy into sports and stuff, definitely follow his channel. He's really good. He did a profile on Eric Bieniemy, and he felt like one of the reasons why he's not getting the opportunity to get a head coaching gig is because he apparently had a few DUIs and a few assaults 20 years ago. Now, obviously, I'm not condoning assaults. By no means. Not saying that's a right thing or that's a good thing. However, I do find it odd that, if we want to do this, if we're going to move the goalposts and say, if you have assaults and that makes us a little bit leery about hiring you. Well, you should probably look at the players that have been signed that have assaults. For example, Josh Brown, who was a kicker for the New York Giants in 2015 or 16, basically brutalized mentally and emotionally and physically his wife of many years to the point, and the New York Giants signed this motherfucker after the fact, and only after media and fan backlash did they release him. A player by the name of Dante Stallworth, who was a wide receiver, I believe it was in 2010, 2011 or 2012, ran over a man, killed him, still got signed a year later by the Baltimore Ravens. Greg Hardy, another guy, basically assaulted his girlfriend, threw her on a bunch of guns, said that these guns are loaded and I could shoot you with any one of them. And a year later, guess what happened? He got signed. Now listen, there's probably countless other cases and examples of this that I can go through, but quite frankly, it'd be too long of a damn vlog, and I ain't got that kind of time, people. But what I am saying is this: let's just be consistent, okay? Do I think Eric Bieniemy will get hired? I hope so. He seems like a good coach. He seems like he needs he should get an opportunity to get a head coaching job. And I think it's telling that black coaches they've moved the goalposts with black head coaches. They made it a lot harder for black head coaches to get jobs. Jim Caldwell, who was who prior to Matt Fatboy Patricia being the head coach of the Detroit Lions, was the head coach of the Detroit Lions prior, black man, coached for 4 seasons, took the Lions to took the Lions to the playoffs 3 out of the 4 years. They didn't win a playoff game, but they got to the playoffs 3 out of the 4 years, got fired, can't get a job. Adam Gase, who looks like he's a deer caught in headlights every time you talk to him and looks like a damn psychopath, got hired in Miami, took them to playoffs 1 year. They had 3 bad seasons. Ryan Tannehill looked like trash. Devontae Parker looked like trash. The whole team looked like trash. He gets fired, gets signed by the Jets the next season because Peyton Manning told them so. And then the Jets are a complete fucking dumpster fire. And then now he gets fired because they went fucking 2-14. And they were on the verge of going 0-16 for the whole fucking year. But he somehow gets a coaching job right after. So don't tell me that race doesn't play a part in this to some degree. Even black quarterbacks. Now black quarterbacks are at the forefront, or are the top quarterbacks in the league. You got Mahomes, you got Watson, you got Jackson. You got these 3 quarterbacks. You probably got these are the top quarterbacks in the NFL. Some of the top quarterbacks in the NFL, top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. Like Mahomes is here, hands down the top quarterback. But there was a period of time where Randall Cunningham and fucking Warren Moon were the only fucking black quarterbacks in the NFL. And Warren Moon, they wanted him to play fucking cornerback or receiver or some shit. And Randall Cunningham, they didn't even want this motherfucker to play. Because they didn't like his style and the way he was flashy and he was all swaggy and shit. I watched the documentary on Randall Cunningham, and the man was the shit. That's why I loved him growing up. So I guess what I'm saying at the end of the day is, with the NFL, and I think with people, we need to be honest. We need to have this on. We still are having these conversations. We're still having the NFL is 70% black, yet we can't get black coaches in there. We barely have any black GMs. We damn sure don't have no fucking black owners. We have one minority owner of the whole fucking NFL. And something's got to change. But here's the thing. And again, I'm not saying that they need to hire these black coaches out of some pity or whatever the case may be. That's not what I'm saying. But ultimately, if you're looking at, let's say, a coach like Brandon Staley, who was a coordinator for about roughly a year, if I'm not mistaken, because I know Wade Phillips was the defense coordinator for the Rams for about 2 years, for a long time, and then they just hired Brandon Staley. And you got all these other coordinators who've only been coordinating for a year and change, and yet they're able to get head coaching gigs. But yet you have someone like Eric Bieniemy who has the pedigree. He played in the NFL, coached in college, coached in the NFL, and he can't get a job. You out there can't tell me that race isn't playing a factor in this. And ultimately, we got to ask ourselves these questions of why this is the case. And again, at the end of the day, race shouldn't matter. let these coaches' resumes stand on their own merits at the end of the day, because it's more than just calling plays to make you an NFL coach or make you a coach or leader of men. Period. It's also a matter of whether you can lead men and your demeanor and your personality and your swag and things like that, and whether those players believe in you or not. And that is a mic drop.